As Arab states decide to cut commercial ties with President Bashar al-Assad's government and freeze its assets in response to violence in Syria, questions are being raised. Will it help end the bloodshed? And can this difficult economic situation oust the Syrian president? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. The Arab League has approved sweeping sanctions against the Syrian government in a bid to pressure it to put an end to the ongoing crackdown against protests. The sanctions were drawn up by an Arab League Economic Committee in Cairo on Saturday. They include suspending all flights from member states to Syria, ending transactions with the country's central bank, freezing all Syrian assets in Arab countries, and a travel ban on senior officials of the Syrian government. The move follows Syria's failure to let monitors into the country as part of a broader Arab League initiative aimed at ending Assad's 8-month crackdown on protests. The United Nations says that more than 3,500 people have been killed so far. There's also a French proposal for humanitarian corridors in Syria to alleviate civilian suffering. The Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani made it clear what the Arab League is trying to do is aimed at preventing any foreign intervention. But he warns Syria if they don't change their position, that might become unavoidable.
Despite the fact that some are asking for foreign intervention, but we, as Arab countries and via our procedures, we are trying to prevent any foreign intervention in Syria. And if the Arab countries do not deal in a serious way this problem, then a foreign intervention, and I'm sorry to say, will be the answer.
Well, the EU's oil import ban has already had a big impact on Syria's economy. Oil revenues account for around 20% of Syrian GDP. Before the European Union ban, 90% of oil exports went to the EU, mainly to Germany, Italy and France. So who are Syria's largest trading partners? Let's have a look. These are European Commission figures. It's worth mentioning these figures are from before the start of the crisis. The EU is top of the list. In 2010, the European Union was Syria's biggest trading partner, accounting for 22.5% of Syrian trade. Then Syria's neighbour, Iraq, comes in second place with 13.3%. Saudi Arabia is the third biggest trading partner, with Syria accounting for 9%. China's trade with Syria accounts for 6.9%. Turkey was in fifth place with 6.6%, and Lebanon was sixth with 6.1%. As you head further down the list, you can see that the United States trade volume with Syria is 2.4%. Well, now Syria is accusing the Arab League of paving the way for an international intervention against Damascus. But actually, since the Syrian uprising began in mid-March, no direct international intervention has been proposed. Many analysts say the support for the protesters has been balanced against fears of instability in a country at the heart of so many conflicts in the world's most volatile region. The first response came from the US in May. The Obama administration imposed economic sanctions on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his top aides. That was followed by similar steps by the EU in August, announcing travel bans, asset freezes and recently an oil embargo. Syria has also faced condemnation from the UN and Turkey. But do punitive sanctions, condemnations, even reconciliation initiatives really work? For more on this, I'm joined by our panel of guests. From Dubai, Ashraf Al-Moqdad, a Syrian member of the opposition. From London, Seale, author of The Struggle for Arab Independence. And joining us from here in Doha, Kamal Wazne, a political analyst. Can I start with you, Ashraf? Before we talk about sanctions, let me talk about the current economic situation inside Syria. Tell us what the situation is right now and how existing sanctions are biting.
Well, in the admission of the central bank chief just a couple of days ago, and he actually warned how dire the situation, the financial situation in Syria is. The dollar has hit the £57 for the dollar, and that's a lot of money. That nearly 20% drop in the Syrian pound just the last few weeks. So he is warning everybody he deal with that Syrian economical situation is really dire. So this is not going to help. as Syria tried ideologically with only sort of two major sections in the world, which is the European Union and the Arab world. European Union now it's seized, the trade is seized now, and now the Arab world, which is nearly 38% of the trade. So this will bring a dire situation to the economy of Syria for sure.
Kamal Wazne, it's certainly having an economic effect, but is it having a political effect? And who are these sanctions hurting the most?
Well, obviously, it's a sad day for the Arab League to impose sanctions against a sister country, Syria. I think the most people who can be hurt by these sanctions are the average people in Syria. They can feel the pain, and eventually the Syrian economy will be hurt for a very long time to come. Today, this economic situation will be more difficult. The economic condition has been going deteriorating over the past 8 months. This sanction will exacerbate the economic condition and will be a burden in the Syrian people, and I think the political establishment will not be affected as much as the average Syrian people.
Sorry, Mr.
Go ahead, Ashraf.
Wazim, actually, it's not giving you really the right picture. The fact is, the whole brutality of the Syrian regime depends on thugs that have been paid tons of money. If we starve the regime of Syria of that fund, that's where the thing's going to be improved to the Syrian people. Syrian people today, they're calling every weekend, they're calling for some sanction and some move from the Arab world and the international community. Syrian people, if the Syrian people ask for it, they actually sacrificing for the bigger good, which is to get rid of Assad and his thugs. So yes, we're going to have a little bit of hardship, but the main person, actually this sanction is hitting the European sanction and the other sanction. It's actually hitting the army, hitting the government ability to actually exact dollars and liquidity to give its thugs.
Patrick, can I ask you about the travel ban? They're going to publish a list of names of those that can't fly. That's going to be humiliating for some of Syria's top leaders, particularly as it was the Qatari Prime Minister who announced it, and he was pretty good friends, wasn't he, with the Syrians just months ago?
Absolutely. I mean, these sanctions, of course, will hurt the regime, and indeed, as one of your speakers said, will hurt the Syrian people. There's a sort of terrible contradiction there with the suggestion that the sanctions won't hurt the Syrian people. Of course they will. But that's not the point. The question is, will they be sufficient to topple the regime? Now, I don't think so. You see, for example, Saddam Hussein resisted sanctions for very many years. The sanctions in themselves will not be sufficient. And I think there's no appetite among the Western powers to intervene in Syria. Syria will have the protection of Russia and China at the Security Council. So I fear that this is not the way to resolve this question and this crisis. The crisis is very severe, there's no question about it. And of course, shooting unarmed protesters is a crime. And their legitimacy of the regime has been undermined. But as we all know, the opposition has now resorted to weapons as well. There's a so-called the Free Syrian Army. Now, my fear, and I think the fear of many people, is that Syria will descend into a sectarian civil war. And we've seen examples of that in Lebanon and particularly in Iraq. Now, nobody wants that. Anybody who cares for Syria, anybody who cares for the Arabs in general would want to see that. Therefore, I think a negotiated settlement is the only way to bring this crisis to an end.
Ashraf, Patrick has a point there, doesn't he? When you look at other places that sanctions have been used against Saddam's Iraq, sanctions now against Iran, sanctions have a very slow effect.
No, the situation is totally different. In Syria, you got a popular revolution, which is want to topple its dictator. So the comparison between Iraq and Syria and Iran and Syria is totally irrelevant. I disagree totally. You got to understand, this is what Syrian people want. that wants Assad out. Now the Arab League, now remember, the Arab leadership, it's the most conservative leadership in the world. Those people that don't like change, they don't like interfering with other people's business, but Assad has left them with no room whatsoever, has not been reasonable, has not obeyed by the condition, which is the Arab League, which is, we, in our views as the opposition, it's quite mild really. But Assad knows any compromise, it means his regime will go. So that's why he's refusing to obey by any reasonable demand by the Arab League, even the United Nations, even the European Union, even the United States, and he just resulted only to the gunpowder and to the guns and killing people and killing innocent people, which is the entire population of Syria. I would say at least the majority of Syria don't want Assad there anymore. He has to go, and the Arab League joining now with us, the revolution, to tell Assad, well, time is up, buddy.
Kamal Wazne, when you look at the Arab League and who voted for this, the two countries that were unhappy with it are two of the neighbours, Iraq and Lebanon. Is it just because they're the neighbours, or is this dividing on sectarian lines?
I think it's the new map of the Middle East. I think what's happening here, I think Syria is paying for the losses that America incurred in Iraq. America lost Iraq. The Arab felt they're very vulnerable. They want to compensate the situation in Syria. They want to change the regime in Syria, because this will draw a new map for the Middle East and put back the balance in the region. And I think that if something happen in sectarian war happen in Syria, will have legs in Lebanon and in Iraq, because a lot of people saying even when the American withdraw from Iraq, we could face sectarian war. Sectarian war is not a good option for the region. I think for the history, I want to say it economically, when the opposition very happy when their currency devaluation, that's really a pity, because eventually in the future economically you don't have any debt now on the part of the national debt. Eventually you will have a lot of debt similar to civil war, with huge debt, and would not serve the interest of the people of Syria now or in the future.
Okay, Ashraf, your turn. Your
on
point.
The opposition, Mr. Ashraf, this would not help your cause to have sanction on your own people. This not would help when you you have like opposition.
I'm sorry,
now
I don't
shooting.
need an Iraqi to tell me what's good for my people.
I'm not an Iraqi, I'm Lebanese.
King Abdullah of Jordan, when King Abdullah of Jordan said about the Shiite Christians, which is now start from Iran and finish with the Hezbollah, he was right. See, if you look at the only two countries which is objected to the sanction, it's Iraq, which is governed and run by the Shiite government of Mr. Maliki, and you got Lebanon, which is run by government control and run by Hezbollah.
Well, this is the language that we don't want in the Middle East, to have sectarian war and people like you talking about Shia and Sunnah. We're talking about people want to live in dignity and have unity among themselves, and we don't want the language of the Salafists that bring us to a language that should not be in the first place.
I just don't believe that. When the Iraqi government now going after the Baathists and looking them up and taking them all the way, and they want us to put up with our own Baathists. How reasonable is that? But because our own Baathists is a sectarian close to you guys, so now we have to put up with our Baathists, and you guys looking for them everywhere and put them up and look them up and even killing them. So stop playing both games. The fact is, you actually got the American help to get rid of sectarian government in your country and the Baathist thingy, and now you're trying to tell us that we can't do the same thing. Even
if you look at gentlemen, I'd like to get Patrick's perspective on this, on the neighbouring countries and the regional dimension. Patrick.
Well, I'd love to get a word in, but of course the passions on both sides are very great. Now, the question is this. You see, even if the Assad family were to jump on a plane and fly out tomorrow, would that solve the problem? Of course not. think of the institutions of the country, think of the officer corps, think of the army, think of the security services, think of the Ba'ath with its huge national network set up since 1963, almost half a century ago. Now you see in Iraq, when the Americans moved in, they disbanded the army, they threw 400,000 people onto the street, they outlawed the party. What was the result? The total collapse of the state, the triggering of a sectarian civil war, hundreds of thousands killed, millions driven out of the country or displaced from their homes. There's still hundreds of thousands of Iraqis in Syria. Now, do people want that in Syria? Or do they, excuse me, just 1 second, Ashraf. Just 1 second, Ashraf. I listen to you, listen to me. Now, do the Syrians want that? Or is there another way out of this? You see, only a compromise, negotiated compromise. Perhaps, I'm not sure that the Arab League can do it. My recommendation is to bring the BRICS country in, bring Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, to form a strong contact group, come into the country, calm tempers on both sides, start a real dialogue, hold the regime to the reforms that it has promised, effect a peaceful transfer of power. That's what's required, because without that, there is a sectarian civil war looming, and everybody will suffer from that. Everybody.
Ashraf, would you not agree with that?
The regime,
that this
Ashraf,
is dividing on...
1 second, Ashraf.
It's
one
not
second,
Ashraf, it's
Ashraf.
James.
I listen to you. Don't interrupt.
Yes,
just 1 second.
Patrick, this is James.
The present,
and I'd like to ask...
measures...
Patrick, it's James here. I'd
The
like
present
to
measures
have a
will
word...
not topple the regime. You see, so long as a situation is kill or be killed, this regime will fight back. Any government, if faced by an armed uprising, will of course respond. When we had here in England, if you recall, we had a strike, we had some violence in the streets, there was an immediate call for the police to be armed. Had it been an armed uprising, we'd have seen the army on the street. The
I'm not even surprised, Mr. Seale, about... I'm not even surprised.
These measures will not topple the regime.
Thank you,
the
Patrick.
Only way
Ashraf,
to effect a peaceful
can I put some of those points to you, please, Ashraf?
Mr. Seale, I'm not even surprised. I'm not even surprised.
Can I put some of those points to you? Do you think that right now this is descending into a sectarian conflict? Do you accept that point?
I accept the fact is, while the regime is stubbornly using his own sectarian people to defend them, it might as well come to this. Now, it's not for us to actually stop this anarchy. It's up to the regime and Bashar al-Assad himself to accept the will of the people and get out of the presidential palace. Now, Mr. Seale,
but it's not just him. It's not just him, Ashraf.
Can I just finish, Mr.
Go ahead.
Seale, please? You made a name for yourself writing about the Assad family and rubbing shoulder with the Assad family. I'm not even surprised that the fact is you're still going to defend your mates and your friends and your family friends. Now, the fact is,
I am not defending.
Can I just finish? Comparing Syria to Iraq, it's false. It's even fraud. Comparing Syria to Iraq. Syria, we have a popular revolution. Popular revolution coming from inside Syria. There is no foreign power. There's no foreign invasion. This is the Syrian will. This is the Syrian people who suffer, who get killed in the last 8 months by the thousands. You know it. I know it. You visit Syria. Your wife's Syrian. You go and you hear it. So stop telling me that Syria and Iraq have any similarity whatsoever. Anyway, at the end of the day, when we talk about sectarian, the sectarian section you're telling me about in Syria, not even 8% of the population. So sectarian war is not even an option here. If that will erupt and even get out of hand, that'll be an ethnic cleansing. Which we hope that's not, we're not going to get there. We hope Assad's not going to descend the country to that anarchy, which is when that's not going to be sectarian war. I could assure you that if that descend to that, what we're trying to do now, what the Arab League trying to do to force Assad to face reality, that the people of Syria don't want him anymore. We've had enough of him, 11 years of absolutely going nowhere, except corruption, except no freedom, no political life whatsoever. We've had
Okay,
enough.
Ashraf,
Syrian
can I
people
now
had enough.
speak to Kamal Wazne? Kamal, tell us how you see this playing out. Tell us what you think the end game in all this is.
I think the end game is very bleak. It's very difficult, not only for the Syria and the Syrian. The end game is very difficult for the whole Middle East. We're playing with fire, and it's not going to stop in Syria. This fire will engulf the whole region. We have to be reasonable. We have to be rational. We have to go back to the negotiation table. I'm Lebanese. I seen war. I seen war. I live in Europe, sectarian war.
Ashraf, you'll have your say on this in a moment.
War is a terrible thing. So you have to learn from the Iraqi experience, from the Lebanese experience. The negotiation table is the answer. We have to find a way. I cannot tell you, you a Syrian, you cannot have your freedom, you cannot have a due process. But look, the Israeli initiative, the Arab gave it from 2002. This is like how many years? 10 years. Why is the rush on Syria? So give it some time. The
Patrick,
Arab have to go back.
I want your view, please, on the end game.
To
How is this going to end,
a reconciliation and
Patrick?
to draw.
Ashraf, you have to learn how to debate, Ashraf. I must say here that I'm not defending the regime. On the contrary, my interest is to protect Syria, and the sooner this regime falls, the better. But it will not fall as a result of this popular uprising, as you say. The more the opposition is armed, the more the regime will feel justified in crushing it. And the balance of power is greatly in the regime's favor at the moment. There will be no external intervention. Nobody has an appetite for that. There will be no resolution at the United Nations Security Council authorizing force. And so the only way out of this is a negotiated, peaceful transition. There is no other way out. If you care for Syria, there is
Ashraf,
no other way out.
what other way out is there, Ashraf?
I think Mr. Seale could pick up the phone and ring your mate in the Bashar and tell him to obey by the Arab League initiative. It's on the table. The sanction today to force him to look into again the protocol which they gave him. The protocol is simple, telling him to stop killing the people of Syria, to withdraw his army off the street of Syria, and to let the people express their opinion, which is any respectable country, and you, Mr. Seale, is supposed to support that. Now, Assad doesn't want to listen to this, so what else? What do you think next? Next, yes, we are going to the United Nations. Yes, we will welcome international intervention, because that's the only way we could have our freedom. Our freedom today, we are not going home without it. That's what the Syrian people say. That's what we did for the last 8 months. That's why we lost 10,000 martyrs, and that's why we have 100,000 people in jail and in different places inside and outside Syria. So
Patrick,
we are not going
you said
home
there was
till
no
take our
appetite for international intervention, but what about this idea of this protection zone? Could that be the next step, do you think?
Well, I mean, a no-fly zone, a protection zone, would require, as it did in Libya, the destruction of Syria's air defenses. Who's going to do that? I can't see any appetite in any Western power to do that. I don't think the Turks would do that either. Every country outside Syria has their own national interests. The Israelis would, of course, like to see chaos in Syria. That they'd be delighted. Their whole policy is to bring down the Tehran-Damascus-Hezbollah axis. Unfortunately, there are some Arab countries who are also obsessed with Iran and think that Iran has designs over the region, which I don't myself personally believe. So I think it's in the Arab interest to avoid total destruction of Syria.
There we have to leave it, Patrick.
The only way out, I repeat, the only way out is a negotiated settlement in which the opposition and the regime sit down under international supervision and hold the regime to the promises of reform.
Patrick, we must end it there. Thank you. Thank you to all our guests, Ashraf Al-Moqdad, Patrick Seale and Kamal Wazne. And thanks to you for being here with us this time on Inside Story. Inside Story at aljazeera.net is our email. All your comments, thoughts, suggestions, even complaints to insidestory@aljazeera.net. From us for now, bye-bye.